while we are not any closer to realizing who he was targeting, what in fact motivated him, we have gained some more information that gives us some insight into what may have motivated him generally. His misogyny, his issues with authority, generally not fitting in with others. He was, I guess you could say, just an unliked person. The long-anticipated murder trial for a Miami matriarch kicked off this week for the killing of her son-in-law over 10 years ago. Plus, the stream of new information continues to flow as documents are released surrounding the investigation into the man responsible for killing 4 college students as they slept. And a parole board has issued their recommendation for 2 brothers convicted of shooting their parents to death over 30 years ago. All this and more this week on Courtroom Confidential. We are honored that you have decided to join us this week. A lot for us to discuss. We are recording this episode on Friday, August 22nd, 2025, and this is your Courtroom Confidential weekly roundup. Let's jump in. A jury has been seated in the trial of 75-year-old Donna Adelson, accused of orchestrating the 2014 murder for hire plot that killed her former son-in-law, FSU law professor Dan Markel. The jury of 12 plus 2 alternates composed of 8 men and 6 women was finalized Thursday after 2 days of individual questioning about their media consumption in the high-profile case, followed by 1 day of group selection. Joshua Zellman, one of Donna's Tallahassee attorneys, asked jurors at length about their feelings on matters that happened to intersect with the facts of the murder for hire, including questions such as, by a show of hands, does anyone think the state could make a mistake? What about law enforcement? Numerous jurors raised their hands. Do you think it would be appropriate or legal for someone to keep large amounts of cash? Zellman asked. Zellman also talked to jurors about the presumption of innocence, the burden of proof, and jailhouse snitches. The latter was a reference to a side investigation into allegations Adelson offered money in exchange for witness testimony while she was in jail. Assistant State Attorney Georgia Kappelman asked potential jurors what killers look like and whether they could, quote, look like a granny, a reference to Donna Adelson, who is 75 years old. Dan Markel and Wendi Adelson, Donna's daughter, were involved in a tense custody battle over their 2 sons when Markel was shot in his driveway in July of 2014. 4 people have since been convicted for his murder, including Donna's son, Charlie, who was found guilty in November of 2023 and given a life sentence. Opening statements are proceeding as we record this episode. The state estimates it will take 5 to 7 days to present its case, while the defense expects it to take 4 to 6 days to present theirs. We will be live streaming the trial on our sister channel, Courtroom Confidential Live Trials. Be sure to subscribe with your notifications turned on so you don't miss any of the action. Well, what's happening here? It cannot be overstated, in my view, just how important jury selection is. How many cases have we seen lost by 1 or 2 jurors, 1 or 2 holdouts? Now, is that a failure of the prosecution to present their case, or is that a failure by the prosecution to identify potential problematic jurors? Or is it a victory by the defense to identify strong-willed jurors who might cut against the grain, depending on how you want to look at it? But far too often, it is a missed opportunity or flat-out mishandled by jurors the way that they present themselves and handle jury selection. In fact, in my view, the most skilled trial lawyers are the best at this exact part of trial, jury selection and voir dire. But it's far more than just picking people. In fact, I think that's a misnomer to say that you're picking a jury. You don't pick a jury, you kick a jury. It's much more about identifying jurors that you don't want on your jury than about identifying jurors that you do. The reason for that is the jurors you likely want for your position are going to be kicked by the other side, and the juror the other side wants, you're going to kick. So at the end of the day, it's really about eliminating rather than it is about adding. But it's also in the hands of skilled lawyers. They know it's about introducing themselves to the jury, getting them to like you, to see you as relatable, and probably most importantly, to see you as someone who is trustworthy. And it's also an opportunity to subtly start to indoctrinate jurors with your theory of the case. Now, this is not technically allowed. You cannot ask jurors to prejudge the facts of the case, but you can get close enough to the line where you're trying to get them to identify areas where they might have a bias and also weave in your theory of the case. For instance, in this case, what are your thoughts on jailhouse snitches? Do you see how that's a carefully crafted question, referring to them as jailhouse snitches? And think about how this might encourage a robust discussion amongst jurors about just how they feel about jailhouse snitches being overheard by other jurors in the room. How about the prosecution saying, what does a killer look like? I love that question. Can a killer look like a granny? Are they identifying bias in this question? Sure they are. But it's also a very well-crafted question to get jurors already thinking about their theory of the case. Absolutely. But what do you guys think? It's your time to play lawyer in this case. What do you think is the most important theme for each side to be presenting to jurors this early on? Please let us know in the comments. In the weeks leading up to Bryan Kohberger's arrest for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, classmates and professors at Washington State University recalled unsettling encounters with the criminology PhD student, many describing him as intense, domineering, misogynistic, and prone to silent, unblinking stares that left others uneasy, according to a trove of newly released documents. Kohberger pled guilty in July and was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the stabbing deaths of Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Madison Mogen. Records show he was repeatedly flagged by students and faculty for troubling behavior, and complaints about his conduct dominated a faculty meeting just days before his arrest. The file showed that faculty swapped stories about Kohberger and debated pulling his funding and TA position. Quote, "Mark my word, I work with predators. If we give him a PhD, that's the guy that in many years, when he is a professor, we will hear is harassing, stalking, and sexually abusing his students," one of Kohberger's teachers told her colleagues during the meeting. Students also reported being followed after class, blocked in doorways, and trailed to their cars. One said she began keeping tallies of his aggressive staring, while others described inserting themselves into conversations to shield peers from his presence. In other news pertaining to the night of the murders, a newly released Idaho State Police report briefly suggested that Kohberger spoke a victim's name during the murders. The detail came from an initial interview with surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen, who reportedly told an officer she heard a male voice say, "It's okay, Kaylee, I'm here for you." But investigators now say that account was either misheard or miscommunicated. In a follow-up interview days later, Mortensen gave a more detailed statement and did not mention Kohberger using any names. Detectives later confirmed they found no evidence he ever did. In a statement to the Idaho Statesman on Monday, Moscow Police Chief Anthony Dallinger said, "The investigators do not believe the suspect uttered any names." What was confirmed was that Dylan reported hearing a male's voice stating something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to," or "I'm here to help you." What's happening here? Let's talk about this report, because this caused a lot of controversy over the last week, whether or not he in fact used Kaylee's name at any point while he was in the home. Well, let's think about what the purpose of these reports are. And this is a good opportunity for us to really understand how an investigation is put together. Each report has a purpose, and there are many, many reports written by several different officers. And many times, these officers are compiling information being given to them by other officers through other reports. It's almost like a game of telephone. They're being told something that was related to them by someone else. That is why recordings of statements, particularly eyewitnesses, are so important. And those are the substance of those statements. Those become the evidence, not these other supplemental reports. Now, could the defense, had this case had gone to trial, made an issue of this? Maybe, but maybe not. It is several levels of hearsay removed from the actual witness, in this case, Dylan Mortensen. The officer who wrote in their report the use of the name Kaylee, was not the officer who interviewed Mortensen. In fact, he's not even the officer who spoke to that officer. It's several degrees removed. So you could understand the objections being made. They would want to hear from Mortensen themselves at trial or the officer who heard directly from her. You cannot even impeach someone had Mortensen taken the stand with this statement. And I think it demonstrates how many moving parts there are in an investigation. An investigation is sometimes very broad and very fast moving, and many people are involved in it, and many hands are on the evidence. How many hands does some of this information go through? How small details can be lost or distorted in the shuffle? Now, what this does not indicate is any kind of lying or something more nefarious on the part of investigators. The police and prosecution has always maintained that there is no connection, or they have found no connection, between Bryan Kohberger and the victims in this case. And that includes that Mad Greek restaurant where two of the girls worked, and he allegedly may have had an interaction with them. They've looked for it. That was important to them, and they came up with nothing. So while we are not any closer to realizing who he was targeting or what in fact motivated him, we have gained some more information that gives us some insight into what may have motivated him generally. His misogyny, his issues with authority, generally not fitting in with others. He was, I guess you could say, just an unliked person. Now, does that turn a person into a monster? Does that cause someone to go out and commit a quadruple murder? Absolutely not. But perhaps it goes one step closer to helping us to understand why he would start to fixate on something like this. What would plant the seed to start to turn Bryan Kohberger into this evil person that we now know him to be? This case is an absolute nightmare. You're talking about 4 kids committing no wrong who were killed in their sleep. And it involves a person who stepped out of a life of what appeared to be absolute obscurity to commit this type of crime. And for that, I think this case will continue to haunt us for years and years to come. But what do you guys think? Do you have a theory? Why do you think he did this horrible, horrible act? Please let us know in the comments. After a nearly 10-hour hearing, Erik Menendez was denied parole on Thursday. He and his brother Lyle Menendez have spent more than 30 years behind bars for the murders of their parents. Lyle's hearing is scheduled for Friday. The brothers, convicted in 1996 of murdering their parents Jose and Kitty Menendez, became parole eligible after a judge resentenced them in May to 50 years to life. Commissioners are weighing the brothers' conduct in prison, release plans, and testimony from prosecutors and relatives. If found suitable, their case would undergo months of review before landing on Governor Gavin Newsom's desk. Because Erik's parole was denied, the panel must provide a reason for the denial and set a new hearing date. The proposed decision of the hearing panel is not final until it goes through a review process by the Board of Parole Hearings. Newsom, whose office oversaw a separate and still pending clemency application from the brothers, had declined to comment on what he would do if the board recommended parole. Supporters point to the brothers' college attendance and service projects behind bars, describing them as rehabilitated. Prosecutors don't see it the same way. Quote, "The Menendez brothers have never fully accepted responsibility for the horrific murders of their parents, instead continuing to promote a false narrative of self-defense that was rejected by the jury decades ago," LADA Nathan Hochman said in a statement ahead of the hearings. "We have consistently opposed their release at this time because they have not demonstrated full insight into their crimes or shown that they have been fully rehabilitated and therefore continue to pose a risk to society," he said. The case was brought back into the spotlight after a pair of streaming series and advocacy from some high-profile figures and relatives. If parole is also denied for Lyle, both brothers still have their clemency application with the governor's office. Lyle's hearing is currently underway as we record this episode. What's happening here? Well, try as you might, sometimes there is nothing that will hasten the slow wheels of justice. No matter where you fall on the Menendez Brothers case, I think you must admit that up until this point, things have been moving at an incredibly rapid pace, especially for the criminal justice system. Remember this, it was less than a year ago that their chances of ever seeing the outside of a prison were near zero. And now here we sit. Now, this week, they are both before a parole board hearing. And while this may not have turned out the way that they had wanted, I'm sure that they are still feeling very fortunate to even be in the position that they are. Just over 30 years ago, they committed a double homicide. Think about that. They killed their own parents with shotguns. They reloaded to put one final shell into the head of their own mother. Just saying those words now, you can imagine that the two men who committed that crime would never expect to see the outside of a prison. Yet here we are. There's been changes in the law. There's been favorable media coverage. There's even been a favorable DA at one point involved in all of this. And they struck at the right political moment. You could say that the stars had aligned for them, or it was a perfect storm of circumstances, depending on how you want to view it. But maybe it was all just too much, too fast for the criminal justice system. Parole boards are usually not considering cases of this magnitude and seriousness. Think about it. Most cases that are parole eligible are not these types of cases, nor are they the types of cases with this much high-profile media attention. Maybe the parole board and those involved all just thought it was best to take a breath. But what do you guys think? Do you think this was the right or wrong move for this time? Please let us know in the comments. Before we dive into the other cases making headlines this week, I'm going to pause for a moment and just ask you to do me one very small favor, and that is, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel now. It is our goal to continue to provide you with the highest quality content, and the best way that we can do that is through your support. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet, now's the perfect time. You can find exclusive weekly live shows, including our Sunday Fun Day question and answer series, where I answer your true crime questions live at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern every Sunday. You can find the link to tomorrow's live stream in the show notes. Also making headlines, a trial date has finally been set for a Miami OnlyFans model charged with murdering her boyfriend in April of 2022. Courtney Clenney has been in jail since her August 2022 arrest, charged with second-degree murder in the stabbing death of her boyfriend, Christian Obumsele, at their luxury condo. Through her lawyer, Clenney claims that she threw the knife at Obumsele in self-defense. The couple had a volatile relationship that often turned violent, according to authorities. During Wednesday's hearing, a judge set a trial date for December 1st of this year. Earlier this month, defense attorneys filed a motion in limine to admit a CGI animation recreating Clenney's account of the events as demonstrative evidence at trial. The CGI animation would be used only if Clenney testifies to illustrate her testimony and aid the jurors in visualizing her version of events, according to the motion. Clenney will be back in court on October 15th for a pretrial hearing. A Washington couple have been sentenced for a violent altercation with their teenage daughter at a bus stop outside a high school, which had been described by many as an attempted honor killing. The father, Ihsan Ali, was convicted of second-degree assault, unlawful imprisonment, and fourth-degree assault. He received the maximum on the first two charges, 14 months in prison for assault and 12 months for unlawful imprisonment. He has already spent 10 months in jail. Fatima's mother, Zahra Ali, was convicted of violating a no-contact order. She was sentenced to 364 days in jail with 83 days suspended. Zahra was not taken into custody since she served 9 months in jail before the verdict. Prosecutors said the October 2024 attack happened after the victim ran away from home to escape her father, who was allegedly trying to send her to Iraq to marry an older man she had never met. The incident between Fatima and her father was captured on surveillance video from an intercity transit bus approaching the school, as well as videos from several bystanders. Prosecutors argued that Ihsan Ali was angry with his daughter and placed her in a chokehold and squeezed her neck, all while students attempted to free Fatima from her father's grasp. Defense attorneys argued that the incident amounted to 53 seconds. and there was no clear evidence that either parent tried to harm Fatima. "You're a monster, and I can't believe you're my dad," the daughter told her father during her victim impact statement. "How could you call yourself a father? You tried to kill me. My dad tried to kill me with his own hands." Addressing her mother, she added, "My mom saw me almost pass away right in front of her eyes and didn't help me at all. Didn't say if I was okay. Didn't even try to be there for me." A woman known by prosecutors as the ketamine queen, charged in connection with the overdose death of a Hollywood actor, agreed to plead guilty on Monday. Jasveen Singha is the fifth and final defendant charged in the overdose death of Friends star Matthew Perry to strike a plea agreement with federal prosecutors, avoiding a trial that had been planned for September. Federal prosecutors announced Singha will plead guilty to 5 counts, including distribution of ketamine resulting in death or serious bodily injury, maintaining a drug-involved premises, and additional counts of ketamine distribution. In exchange, prosecutors will drop 3 other counts related to the distribution of ketamine and 1 count of distribution of methamphetamine that was unrelated to Perry's case. She faces up to 45 years in prison. Prosecutors allege Singha supplied Perry with large quantities of the drug shortly before his death in October of 2023, with the final batch containing the fatal doses. She and Dr. Salvador Plasencia, who signed his own plea deal on June 16th, have been the primary targets of the investigation. 3 other defendants agreed to plead guilty last year in exchange for their cooperation, which included statements implicating Singha and Plasencia. None of the defendants in the case have yet been sentenced. Perry struggled with addiction for years, dating back to his time on Friends, when he became one of the biggest stars of his generation as the character Chandler Bing. A former Oklahoma City pediatrician accused of killing her 4-year-old daughter in Florida is now facing a second-degree murder charge. Neha Gupta was first arrested in July on a first-degree murder warrant, later charged with aggravated manslaughter, and now charged with second-degree murder. With additional information supplied to prosecutors by the Miami-Dade County Medical Examiner's Office, the felony charge of second-degree murder has now been filed and will be litigated as the appropriate criminal charge, Lizette Valdez-Valle, a Miami-Dade state attorney spokeswoman, said in a statement. In the early hours of June 27th, Gupta called 911 from a rental home in Miami-Dade County, claiming her daughter drowned. First responders found the child, 4-year-old Aria Talathi, unresponsive in the pool, but an autopsy revealed there was no water in her lungs or stomach, instead finding cuts inside her mouth and bruising on her cheeks. Investigators allege Gupta smothered her daughter and staged the drowning. She was arrested at her Oklahoma City home on June 30th and later extradited to Miami-Dade, where she remains in custody awaiting trial. Defense attorneys have called the incident a tragic accident. "We are just as baffled by the states going back and forth with their charges. At one point, it seemed the state was conceding that the poor girl did in fact drown by accident," defense attorney Richard L. Cooper said in a statement. Aria's father, who was in a custody dispute with Gupta, told police he didn't know she had left Oklahoma with their daughter. Oklahoma court records show Gupta had been ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation in May. Gupta will be back in court on November 13th for a hearing. A Carroll County grand jury has formally indicted a 17-year-old girl accused of fatally shooting her mother and stepfather in February. The 8-count indictment, which was returned just hours after a judge denied bond, charges Sarah Grace Patrick with 2 counts each of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Patrick was arrested in July, 5 months after her mother, Kristen Brock, and stepfather, James Brock, were found shot to death in their bed. The victims were discovered by Patrick's 5-year-old sister. Patrick had been posting emotional videos on social media mourning their deaths for months. One post captioned, "Please send prayers for healing." At the end of the same video, she added, "I should prob delete later." Police said at the time of her arrest that mountains of evidence had led them to charge the teenager. During a bond hearing on Tuesday, relatives of her stepfather urged the court to keep her jailed, expressing fear she could harm others. "Your Honor, it feels like I'm living in a nightmare," said Brock's oldest son, Tristan Brock. However, her supporters, including family, friends, and her pastor, argued that she is not a threat. Her friends contended she doesn't have this in her and is not the evil person the Brock family is making her out to be. Her pastor described praying with her and talking about what she's reading when speaking with her in jail. However, Judge Dustin Hightower ruled prosecutors had shown she was not a candidate for release. though he noted she remains presumed innocent. Patrick's arraignment is set for September 22nd, with a tentative trial date of January 5th. In June, investigators first learned that a 16-year-old from South Carolina was allegedly lured to his death and fatally shot over a romantic rivalry. Now, authorities have arrested 9 teenagers, including his girlfriend, in connection with his death. Deputies say Trey Dean Wright was lured to a remote road in Johnsonville, about 50 miles northwest of Myrtle Beach, on June 24th, where he was fatally shot. His girlfriend, 17-year-old Gianna Kistenmacher, allegedly brought him to the scene knowing 19-year-old Devin Raper was armed and looking for a confrontation. On June 25th, deputies arrested Raper on suspicion of shooting and killing Wright, now charging him with murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. Sheriff T.J. Joy said the 2 teens had issues with each other and it was over a female, Joy said. The sad thing is you've got a 16-year-old that lost his life. You've got a 19-year-old who is going to be in jail for the rest of his life. Over what? Then on June 30th, deputies arrested Kistenmacher and charged her with accessory before the fact of a felony. Earlier this month, authorities announced additional arrests. Hunter Matthew Kendall, age 18, was charged with murder, along with Corrine Elizabeth Belviso, 18, and Sydney Marissa Kearns, 17. 4 other suspects whose names were withheld because they are minors were also charged as adults under state law. Investigators allege the group knowingly set up the deadly encounter, with one teen even recording the shooting. Raper and Kendall remain held without bond. Kistenmacher was released on home confinement, while Belviso and Kearns were released on bond pending trial. I was checking my emails for criminal defense inquiries, and I had to wade through what felt like hundreds of spam emails, just to find a few legitimate ones. It was frustrating, but more than that, it was a wake-up call. That kind of junk doesn't just show up by itself. So I Googled myself just to see what was out there, and it was disturbing. There were sites that listed my telephone number, my email address, even the names and addresses of my friends. And I didn't put any of it out there. It made me feel very exposed, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. That is why we are very excited to announce our first ever sponsor, Aura. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number and why you have an inbox full of junk, this is why. Brokers collect and sell your information without your permission and make billions doing it. Even though they are legally required to move it if you request them to do so, sometimes getting that done is almost impossible. Aura does the hard part for you, automatically requesting removal from those shady websites and keeping that info off from them. We talk about security and crime all of the time on this channel, and I wasn't protecting myself. I was like the plumber whose own pipes leak at home. It's an all-in-one digital security platform. You get alerts if your information is found on the dark web, fraud alerts from your bank, a VPN, an antivirus, a password manager, and even $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's all in one app with US-based support 24/7. That's why I chose Aura and why we are recommending it to all of you. You can try it free for 14 days if you just go to aura.com/courtroom confidential. In those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and neither should you. It's a great product, and it's a great way to support the channel. Please check it out. Before we get to what's coming up next week, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of this growing community, and to give a special shout out to Yods for the review on Apple Podcasts, and to our CC crew members, Subi Sue 6130 and Lori 1120 for your support over on YouTube. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Please keep those reviews coming. We appreciate your help in spreading the word about Courtroom Confidential. On the docket for next week, Lindsay Clancy, the Massachusetts woman charged with murdering her 3 young children before attempting to take her own life, will be back in court on Monday, August 25th for a scheduling conference. Henry Tenon, the confessed gunman allegedly hired by Shanna Gardner in the murder-for-hire shooting death of her ex-husband Jared Bridegan, will be back in a Florida court on Tuesday, August 26th for a status hearing. Dale Warner, the Michigan man charged with murdering his wife Dee Warner, will be back in court Wednesday, August 27th for a pretrial hearing. Naresh Bhatt, the Virginia man charged with murdering his wife Mamta last year and dismembering her body, will be in court on Wednesday, August 27th. Brian Walsh, the Massachusetts man charged with murdering and dismembering his wife Anna, will be in court Thursday, August 28th for a discovery hearing. And finally, please join us this Sunday for our special question and answer series, Sunday Fun Day. All are invited to leave us a voice message at thecourtroomconfidential.com, which I will answer live during tomorrow's show at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And you can find the live stream on YouTube, X, and Facebook. That is it for us this week, folks. I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find us on social media at CR Confidential on X, at The Courtroom Confidential on Instagram, or at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Thank you again for joining me. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again next week for another episode of Courtroom Confidential.